Welcome to the Healthcare Nation podcast. We're committed to bringing you thought leaders in the field to discuss what's new and noteworthy in the healthcare sector. Now your host, Rick Gennaro.
Okay, welcome to the Healthcare Nation podcast. Here with our producer, Joe Woolworth. Joe, great
Hello.
to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
You and I face to face right in the studio, which I love.
Yeah, we're talking 2024 predictions and what's coming up.
We're doing it. We've covered a lot this past year. I had a lot of fantastic guests. And I think one of the things that I love to do is really, get our finger on the pulse of what's happening for the next year. So we'll make an attempt to do that. I know you came up with a lot of questions for us. I gave you some feedback in advance, so hopefully this will be great for the audience.
All right, well, let's jump in. So let's talk about first the clinical advancements, consumer and retail entrants, emerging trends, venture capital, and private equity activities. Rick, give us your thoughts.
Okay, so it was a lot
That's
to
a
jump
big
right
question.
in on there. Yeah, let me just give some insights across all the categories. First, consumer centricity. Yes, I think it's going to be something that is going to be top of mind for most folks who are going to, first of all, startups, as well as existing healthcare systems, hospitals, even private practitioners when you're out there. The consumer-centric approach, I think, is driven by a couple of things. One is obviously demographics, generational fragmentation, and stratification. So it is important when you look at this shift and how it manifests. We see this retail clinics, telehealth, and digital marketplaces. So that's happening. The other side, the market side and venture capital, a lot happening there. That is going to, I think, be regulated and modulated by a combination of obviously money going in and out of the system, but also regulation and how that kind of shakes out over 2024. And from the financial side, the investment side, I think we're seeing pre-pandemic kind of ecosystem reemerging, and that's perhaps blunting some of the exuberance we had within the last 24 months, but it's more realistic as we move forward. So that's my kind of 2 cents to tee things up as you asked.
Gotcha. All right, so next up, let's dive into healthcare trends and predictions for 2024. So this is kind of the part of the show where Rick puts the envelope up to his head like Sarnak.
That's it.
And I'll rapid fire you some thoughts.
I like it.
And we'll jump in. So the first thing is continued mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. In general, I think with what we're going to see, look, it's also tied to some of the elements I talked about just a second ago. One is the flow of money and what's happening in the economy, et cetera. I think there's going to be ongoing consolidation. I think there will be strategic partnerships happening. They may be new, different, and very novel. We're seeing this play out where there's this synthesis of maybe consumer-minded elements matching up and linking in with some of the established healthcare players. I see that happening. The bottom line is that what we talked about as potential, I think, areas where things took off during the pandemic, like interoperability across state lines, that's still going to blunt some things with regional boundaries. But we are going to, I think, see an uptick, to your question, in M&A activity.
All right. So again, we're talking trends and predictions 2024. Next topic, workforce challenges.
Yeah, I would put this in the top 3 biggest challenges moving forward. Obviously, one of the biggest out there, burnout that we've seen during the pandemic, clearly an aging workforce. We see this with nursing, at the bedside nursing specifically. This is going to drive new models of care moving forward. I think there will be a lot more opportunities for folks entering the workforce, but we'll have to see how that shakes out, Joe.
Is your sense that people are aging out a lot faster than new people are coming in?
I think yes, 2 things with that. One is, if you take a look at the average, let's take nursing, for instance, the average nurse is in their late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And at a point in their career, when you take a look at demographics, gender, et cetera, the backfill, the replacement just is not a one-to-one scenario. It's not happening. And I would say this also, new nurses going in have a different, perhaps, appreciation for where they want their career to go. And it may not be at the bedside completely. That is confounded with just the numbers. There just isn't enough faculty teaching them, et cetera. So that's going to be a big, I think, issue for us moving forward. And again, I think if there's a positive side, it will compel the system to change the model of care.
Okay. All right. So 2024 prediction on reimbursement challenges.
Wow. This could have been a 2020, 2021. I mean, it goes on and on. Here's the bottom line: reimbursement rates seem to never keep pace with inflation. That's just the reality when you think about it. So I think we're going to see that continue. It'll be also influenced by issues with pre-authorization, delays, and conflicts between payers and providers. That will it be different than in the past? No, it's just more of the same.
So up next, we've got digital health and AI.
Oh, these are two of your favorite subjects.
I know. I like this part. Yeah.
You'll love this, where you deal with this every day.
Skynet. I'm hoping you say Skynet.
Yeah,
Not Skynet yet.
Skynet for healthcare. Now, that's a scary thought, because
Right.
who will the Terminator be in that? Look, generative AI, natural language processing, machine learning, all of that, tremendous opportunities. When we look at that, I think first low-hanging fruit, I just talked about pre-authorization. I think that's one of them. Also workflows, when you talk about notes and what we do with respect to even taking a history and physical summaries, digital technology, a great opportunity. But I do think it's going to be challenging to implement this and make it work across the healthcare ecosystem at a velocity and a clip where it's going to have kind of a return that we want. So we shall see. I'm very bullish on this, as you know, and it's happening, but I do think it's going to take some time. It's probably one of the best areas we have moving forward, though.
2024 prediction on consumer-driven healthcare markets.
Yeah, this obviously another theme that you and I have talked about so often on the show. Look, increasingly driven by the influence that consumers will have. And I've characterized it perhaps too often as a consumer as someone who's got their hand on the lever of where they're going to get the care that flips them to being a patient. And that is now a much more charged transaction than ever before, meaning it's everyone's fighting for that. And how you can really take a page out of the book of banking and retail to crack the code on a really good consumer experience, I think is going to be something that we're going to see more and more of, starting probably with some of the Medicare Advantage programs where they try to clean up their act and become more consumer centric, but certainly not stopping there when you think about what's happening in the retail side, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah. All right. So 2024 prediction on the impact of AI on healthcare costs.
Well, AI and healthcare costs. I think a lot of folks are hoping that there's going to be a big windfall. I don't see this happening in 2024. I think it's going to be over time. Probably the real returns are going to happen in 5 or so years as it starts to get into the clinical area and we start to see the velocity of care change. Everything from actual, technologies that compress things like pre-authorizations or step therapy and clinical trials. I think that's where we're going to start to see that transformative impact happen. That said, it's going to pick up. We'll be seeing some elements of it probably from the efficiency side making a difference, but I think the real bang for the AI buck is going to come a few years out.
All right, so 2024, Ozempic, we got their GLP-1 agonist popularity. Is it going to keep ramping? What do you think?
Yeah. Wow. I think we dedicated like a short to this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
We did. And I know you love the Ozempic song. There's no doubt about it.
It really gets stuck in your head.
It does. And talk about consumer marketing. I mean, we just had our last podcast talking about the influencers on this. Look, here's the bottom line. The GLP-1s work. They work. I mean, and we'll see with Mounjaro how that's going to, I think the uptick there is going to be even more. There'll be more indications, is my prediction for the drugs. We know this has an influence on addiction in general. So I don't know how the GLP-1s will be used in that space as well. So not necessarily limited to weight loss, but in some of the other areas with respect to satiating some, I hate to use the word cravings, but it's the reality.
They're saying that it might satiate things beyond just food.
Yeah, we're seeing that with alcoholism, even some substance abuse. So it is interesting to see what the early data is suggesting, and I think it's certainly cause for some encouraging optimism with the drugs. The other thing is they work for weight loss. That's the reality. The question is going to be, will they be abused like any other drug? I mean, that's the reality. I think it's a go-to for many people, perhaps bypassing, exercise and other traditional modalities. At the end of the day, look, I think we're at the beginning of these, and they are truly blockbuster drugs. We see this even with not only their impact factor clinically, but also obviously the financial side.
And the conversations I hear about them specifically revolve around the idea of so what happens when you stop taking them?
Yeah. We know this, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. For folks who think they're going to be on it for the rest of their life, I'm not talking about not giving clinical advice here. I think that is impractical, right? I mean, it should be a way to get to a
It's
point.
not impractical if you're the drug company.
That's true. Yeah, man, that's it.
It's plan A.
You are learning, Joe. He is learning. There's no doubt about that.
All right, predictions for challenges for startups in 2024.
Man, I think the big challenge for startups right now is going to be valuations. I don't want to say unrealistic valuations, but I think valuations in general, I think that's going to be an issue we see. We talked about this in the podcast before. I think, early stage startups, they may not get the valuation they want. And startups who've been later stage or folks who've been out there a couple of years may be surprised that they're not getting the kind of, recognition for their investment. And I'm not talking about money wise, but just in general for where they thought they'd be valued at. I think that's probably number one. And then I believe back to pre-pandemic kind of ecosystem. There was a lot of money flowing out there. Now I think there's a more measured approach, very focused on some really incredible novel approaches that I've seen with these startups that are very impressive. So I'm still very positive, but I do think if there's challenges, it's just going to be getting their head around valuation.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy to think that we're only really 3 years from the start of the pandemic, really. And that obviously had a huge impact on clinician morale. What do you think is coming up in 2024 when it comes to the morale of a clinician?
Yeah, and you talked about just the clinician workforce in general. So my predictions there are not very good. I think there's going to be a shortage of key clinicians,
right.
Nurses, physicians in certain specialties and others. When you talk about morale in general, I think it's this lag, burnout, underappreciation, and also when you take a look at wage rate and inflation and the economics, I think that's impacting a lot of folks, particularly bedside caregivers, and it's tough and it's taking its toll. And when you have an older population of clinicians, and we use nursing as the example, it's taking more and more to keep these folks engaged if they have alternatives. And I think that's something that every healthcare executive or anyone in the sector should be thinking about, including patients and consumers.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about burnout specifically, there was really no other catalyst that pushed it in a good direction. Yeah. I mean, collectively, we all were very appreciative towards nurses during the pandemic, which I think is great, but it didn't seem to come with pay increase or less responsibility or help. So I don't know that burnout's not one of those things that just tends to get better.
Yeah. And, it's from your perspective, and you're not in healthcare,
right.
You know this. And I think it's not lost on individuals because everyone knows someone and many folks are in healthcare. Obviously, it's a big population of folks. But yes, what you said is exactly true. And I think the underappreciation, the lack of support during that particular time during the pandemic was something that made a big impact on these individuals. And I think, yes, it's impacted their morale.
All right, so let's switch gears. Let's talk about your predictions, 2024, major tech companies entering into healthcare.
I remain bullish on the investment side when you look at healthcare and the health sector in general. But when you marry it to fintech and technology in general, I love that combo. So when I think about this, I think there's going to be significant shifts continuing. And what do I mean by that? I think the best of folks who've been maybe in the financial arena and in the retail side and the technology side, the advancements we're seeing there are going to come together under this clinical umbrella. And we're going to see some very exciting new things happen. There'll probably be a lot of swapping of high-tech talent, between companies. I think that'll be good too, as they seed that kind of brain power in different avenues that we see in healthcare, tech, and fintech.
So speaking of swapping talent, what's your thoughts on leadership turnover in healthcare organizations next year?
I think when we talk about healthcare delivery, let's say hospitals in general, I think there's going to be continued turnover. That's been increasing as that group of C-suite executives also ages out. But the other side of this is this skill set shift, Joe, that I think is going to be happening. The competencies that you would expect the hospital or health system CEO to have, let's just say 15 years ago, are no longer the complete set that you need moving forward in 2024 on.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? Social determinants of health, housing, community, a lot of the issues that are out there that are impacting, I think, a hospital and health system as being part of the public trust is going to be, I think, a C-suite prerogative for executives moving forward in the health sector in general, but in hospital delivery and health system leadership specifically.
Yeah. So let's explore some themes now. Let's look at some things thematically here. Theme 1, M&A consolidation.
There was a pandemic related drop. I don't want to put it all on the pandemic, but there's no doubt about that. And but what I do think might change moving forward, and we are seeing this, perhaps more on the non-direct health sector side, is there are non-traditional disruptors that are coming into the space. We saw that with Amazon and One Medical, and I think that's going to continue on. So yeah, I don't see this changing. Will it pick up considerably? I don't know, but it'll be more than was happening within the last 24 months for sure.
Gotcha. On the theme of workforce talent challenges.
Yeah, we talked about this twice already. It's going to continue. I don't see this changing. I think investing in your workforce, retention, addressing clinician burnout are imperative. And I think also looking at opportunities to engage and even recast certain roles that are existing right now into a more future model of care is something to start thinking about.
What about the theme of affordability and empowered consumers?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is going to be driven by perhaps demographic changes, stratification by age, where folks are getting their healthcare. I mean, we've seen this more. Telehealth gave us a little snippet, but I do believe a younger generation, like yourself and younger, are going to be looking for a new way to engage and access healthcare delivery. It'll be more affordable, but it'll also have that retail and consumer kind of construct that I believe a lot of investments going in. So I may not have answered that specifically, but I think that's a general theme as you asked for.
So we teed this up in the beginning, the idea of emerging trends and consumer-based retail entrance into the healthcare delivery. So let's unpack it. Let's dive deep into it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Just right off the top of my head, we know this CVS, Walgreens. I talked about Amazon getting in there with One Medical. I think the convenience factor for access to healthcare is going to be paramount moving forward. I've already talked about the fragmentation, kind of the demographic influences here and the stratification. That's going to drive a lot of that. So think about age, where folks are going to get care, how they like to get care. We're going to see that if it's enabled by telehealth, it'll be even better. Digital marketplaces are going to be part of this. I think also wearable health technology. I don't know how that's going to play in, but to your question, when you said emerging trends, we're going to be seeing much more on the wearable side.
There's some big advancements in the wearable that you wouldn't expect your ring to be able to do. Like that Amazon ring can determine crazy stuff that I didn't think it would do. Like, hey, remember the ads that they put out, right? It shows a woman getting ready and she's looking at her ring and then she has a little readout and it's reminded her that her period's going to start because it's been monitoring her body temperature and letting her know that, hey, it's about time. And so it's that kind of stuff, letting us know when we're going to get sick, things like that. I mean, it's pretty interesting. They can take your oxygen levels, all this kind of predictive stuff that they can build into their tools. It's going to become interesting.
It's going to become interesting. I think that my suggestion would be anyone looking at this should also unpack it. I think there's a lot of promise. We're seeing this in the wearables in the watch category, right? So I'm talking about beyond the Apple Watch. We know that Masimo's got a watch coming out there that is quite extraordinary. When you look at pulse oximetry, which you mentioned the Ring apps that are out there. I think the wearable side and how that connects to not only the digital component of healthcare delivery and these new consumer models is going to be this one of those areas where when I talk about new models of care, it'll be part of that space.
Right.
But the other piece is, just telehealth in general. And that has been, I do think, when we saw this with the pandemic, kind of blunted by a lack of regulation and recognition of there needs to be interoperability across states and state lines when you're looking at really optimizing telehealth. I think that's going to be addressed in the next couple of years.
Next topic we teed up at the beginning, venture capital, private equity in healthcare. What are your thoughts on what's coming up, what's anticipated in 2024?
Right. And of course, no investment advice here. We're just giving our overall general thoughts. Look, I think if I could just fire back, continued investment in digital health. I think particularly where you can see this kind of convergence of even fintech, models and ways to create efficiencies in workflow, but also applications that are directly patient-centered and can add, I think, time to the clinician's day that is outside of charting, in front of a computer. If we can compress that and there's more time to care give, we're going to see a lot of that type of investment. I think there'll also be, and I've always been bullish on pharma innovation. I think there'll be more there, certainly more on the biotech side, AI-driven healthcare. There'll be big opportunities there for VC and PE moving forward. Retail, genomics, I think direct-to-consumer testing. These are all areas that I think are going to be ripe for investment in the venture and private equity world. See a lot there. And obviously everything we talked about prior to even you bringing this up, I think informs the conversation around what's happening in the space.
What about specifically healthcare infrastructure and IT?
Yeah, I do think when you look at that, now let me depart from private equity. I think there needs to be investment in healthcare infrastructure and IT. The infrastructure in general, even bricks and mortar, it's going to be different as we move forward with telehealth. You won't need a hospital in the same notion that we thought about a hospital, but you still need a structure, and a lot of them have aged out. So I think folks are going to take advantage of the timing and retool their healthcare delivery platform in a different way. The largest part of that, though, I think will be digitizing and the information technology side and just technology in general. And that will be an opportunity, I do think, for investment, certainly on the private equity side. You'll see a lot in that world. Not as much in some of the application side, but I do think that we'll be seeing that.
So what about your thoughts on elderly care and the aging population?
Yeah, look, double-digit growth in the over 65 population going out for a number of years. You're going to see this impact everything from, well, in the healthcare delivery side, just think about the specialties, orthopedics, neurology, many areas, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. But in addition to that, I think the structure around it, the way we give care, post-acute facilities, care in the home, I think there will be a continued growth, really double-digit growth, to keep up with that across the board.
Yeah.
I also think that the opportunity for an aged population to become more proficient at engaging technology in the care of themselves will be an opportunity. How we crack that code for folks who aren't comfortable, accessing their doc through telehealth, and
Sure.
I think that's an opportunity as well.
Another big telehealth player is that BetterHelp. So in that theme, what about mental health startups?
This is an area where I think we've seen the tremendous impact. The data's out there even suggests that it's making a difference. I believe, first of all, there'll be investment overall in mental health, but certainly in the ways that we can look at everything from digital applications for therapy to ways to access individuals who haven't been able to because of everything from distance, having a provider that they can drive to or get in front of. We're going to close the gaps on that with technology. And I think that's all a good thing and absolutely an area for a continued investment.
If you missed the last episode, it was a really good topic, really good guest talking about how just everything that's going on in social media has made it difficult to identify what is truth. Is it now subjective? What's happening? So in that regard, the impact of social media on consumer health decisions specifically, what are some of your predictions on what's coming up this year?
Yeah, we had Dr. Brian Southwell on from RTI. He was fantastic. Everyone should check out that podcast. Look, I think, and we talked about it, where's the source of truth? A lot of this fell apart, I think, during the pandemic, where everyone is recalibrating that now and how it plays out with whether it's vaccines or what we're seeing, in the presidential debates. In fact, on the GOP side, everyone has their own opinion. And perhaps everyone has their own truth. And it really is perspective that's informing that. The bigger piece, I think, that needs to be recognized here is the influence of social media and where you get your news and information and who's giving it to you and the credibility and validity of that, particularly in areas of science. But when we really get down deep in care delivery and taking care of yourself, your health, vaccines or preventative health measures or symptoms that you go on the internet to try to, what is this? And you're self-diagnosing. And I'm all for folks doing their own due diligence. You should do that. Be an informed consumer and absolutely an informed patient. But I do think there's going to be much more focus on the influence of social media on healthcare decision making
Sure.
and individuals' perceptions with that, and how that plays out over time is going to be, I think, something that we're going to see, continued debate. Because when do you regulate it? What's free speech? What is the ultimate source of truth when it comes down to a particular area of science? In this case, we'll talk about medicine.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the reason why social media is becoming such a big part of that conversation is, like you mentioned when you were teeing it up, it's where a lot of people are getting their news.
That's it. Yeah.
Especially as our guest pointed out in that last episode, it's age specific, right? So don't overweight it. It's not like 60-year-olds are getting the primary version of what they think is the truth from TikTok. It's
Right.
just, let's not be unrealistic with it. But at the same time, it used to be the trusted source was the nightly news, and now there's a lot less trust there.
Yeah. Yeah. Which nightly news? What's the trusted source? Where do you go? I don't even, it's very, very interesting. As we said, it was a whole episode. So, but we're going to see much more of this, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out again in some of the debates we're hearing, even along the lines of free speech, perhaps.
Yeah. All right. So overall, financial outlook and market performance.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the healthcare delivery side, there'll probably be improvements in cash flow and we'll say margins in general moving forward. I do think that will be due in part to good expense management. It's a new year, right? For 2024, things have been, I think, settled down post-pandemic. I hate to keep coming back to that, but it's a reality. But I do think hospitals need to continue to maintain strict expense management, as they always do, to ensure that they have the kind of financial, platform that they could wake up tomorrow and do it all over again. More positive than negative.
What about strategic policy considerations?
Yeah, some of this is going to be tied to the 2024 elections when we go out that far. There's no doubt about that. I do think that when you look at if there is increased financial margins for some of these hospitals, where will they invest their money? Will it be in modernizing facilities, their workforce, et cetera? We'll see. I think that, how that plays out. On the policy side, I do think that Medicare and Medicaid will continue to be under the microscope, particularly because of the election side. So when you talk about policy side, and why they're not keeping up with inflation, I think that'll cause some pressure. And obviously there's always this disconnect between how many individuals it takes to fund one Medicare recipient. So that's just a reality. The other side is the Medicaid disenrollment policies. Looking at that, I think there's going to be some focus on that moving forward. Again, we'll see how that plays out in the House and Senate side. And then 340B drug pricing, which is continuing to be an issue as we move forward. How will that impact the hospital operating income?
Let's talk real quick about the Internet of Medical Things and the expansion of this field. How do you think that's going to shape up in 2024?
I know you love that. Yeah, we're not at the point right yet where your refrigerator is talking to your watch and your watch is talking to your doctor and the doc's giving you a prescription or saying, hey man, you ate too much last week, I'm going to put you on a statin. We're not there yet, but I do think the Internet of Medical Things and the Internet of your things, right, specifically, this is going to be a great area for technological advancement, obviously investment and impact for an individual's ability to take agency over their own healthcare. There's no doubt about that. So I think it's going to continue how that interfaces with the wearables we talked about earlier. Right. And it's something that's going to grow double digit.
I think about the wearables, and one of the things that seems to be missing is how does that data that a person is collecting make it to a medical professional? And if that gap is bridged a little bit in 2024, that opens up a whole new thing for diagnostics and all the issues revolving around just telehealth. Like now they have better information to make decisions of.
Absolutely. And clinical trials as well. Our ability to open up clinical trials to larger populations, more diverse populations, leveraging, wearables and the Internet of Medical Things, I think is going to be a great opportunity when it's also, I think, informed by artificial intelligence to make some significant advances in medicine and pharma.
What about the advances as telemedicine continues to get more improved?
Folks they've got a nice taste of telemedicine. No one's going to let go of this. Obviously, the consumer side is going great guns with it, but we're going to see this more and more part of how we deliver care. I do think that the question of interoperability is still going to be an issue state to state, but that's going to be taken care of over time as well, legislatively, and that'll make things and insurance-wise, it'll make things a lot better.
What kind of movement do you think we're going to see in immersive technologies, something like AR?
You love this space too, right,
Yeah.
Matt? I was kind of wary of this early on. We had Rania Habash on, in an early episode, and she talked about how she's using augmented reality and the metaverse to teach, ophthalmologists, which was incredible. I think there's great utility in it. I think matching it and finding the application where that utility gives you a great return is something that's still being worked out. It's not like the gaming area when you think about its applications in, say, clinical medicine, but I do think in training, in simulation, certainly in immersive patient care experiences, we're at the beginning of the beginning.
All right, well, we covered a lot.
We did.
That was a heck of a rapid fire.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of stuff. So let's just summarize. Give me the big summary. 2024 predictions from the healthcare nation.
Yeah. I think we'll go back to the themes, right? Consumer focused, driven by technological innovation, where it intersects between this traditional healthcare model, because we're not done with it yet, and this new model of care which will, as I just said, will be much more consumer centric, underpinned by this retail construct and some very focused and strategic investments in everything that will transform the digital landscape, the technological landscape that goes into drugs, biotech, medtech, and healthcare delivery. Everything that hopefully will make an individual's health and their health status better. I think that's what we're shooting for and what we'll see the continued push with some focus on in 2024. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are for informational purposes only and not associated with any companies or academic institutions. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel, Healthcare Nation Podcast. And if you have any questions or want to contact us, please reach out to healthcarenationpodcast.com.